Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's meeting of Liverpool City Council's Planning Committee. Thank you to a number of members of the public who are present to address committee today. I'll just summarise briefly what we have to do for those items. But in terms of procedural rules, we have members of the committee present who I'll check to verify they can see and hear us and participate fully shortly. If there's any disruptions to the live feed today, obviously I will pause proceedings and I'll ask members to log out and log back in, and the same applies to our speakers, and that should resolve any technical issues we have. In terms of voting, I'll go through members of the committee individually in turn, and as long as you can see yourself clearly on screen, then I'd ask you at that point to unmute your microphone and give me your voting preference. In terms of the conduct of proceedings, a reminder to everyone who's participating in today's meeting to keep your microphone on mute throughout unless you've indicated to speak at that given point. And for agents and applicants, you are allowed up to 5 minutes to address committee. For objectors, you are allowed up to 3 minutes to address committee. The reason for the difference in timing being simply down to the fact that we typically have more objectors present to address typically. With that in mind, therefore, I will now move us on to our first item of business, which is my assessment of ability. So first of all, Chair, can you just unmute your microphone and confirm you can see and hear us, okay?
Yes, I can see and hear you fine.
Thanks, Trish. Tony, can you unmute your microphone and just confirm you can see and hear us, okay?
Yeah, I can hear and see, yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Billy, likewise, could you unmute your mic?
Yeah, I can hear and see everything, Mike.
Could you unmute your microphone, please?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Thanks, Myrna. Councillor Dunn, if you could unmute your microphone, please.
Yeah, can hear you clearly.
Can we have Councillor Hanson, please?
Loud and clear, my God.
Thanks, Joe. There's a bit of a time delay with your video catching up, but we'll pick that up when we get to the voting stage. And obviously, if you have any comments to make as we go forward, we'll come to that. Councillor Thompson, can you see and hear us okay?
Yes, thank you. I can see and hear everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Kennedy, can you see and hear us okay?
Yes, I can see and hear very well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that picks up all of our members who are present today. Councillor Cummings, welcome. Just seeing you here.
I can see and hear everything.
If you could make sure your video's turned on as well, that'd be great. Just to make sure. It's coming on now. Excellent. It's on now, Dave. That's fine. That's perfect. In which case, we'll deal firstly with apologies for absence. So Councillor Steve Radford's apologised for today's meeting, and welcome to Councillor Joe Dunn, who's attending as his alternate on this occasion. In terms of item number 1, therefore, do members have any declarations of interest to declare, please? And if so, could you please unmute your microphone at this stage?
Yes, morning Chair, morning everyone. I'd like to declare an interest as a committee member. I'm Councillor Myrna Juarez for Allerton Hunts Cross. I will be speaking on item 5, Streetworks on Manor Avenue, and item 9, which is Hillfoot Road, Speak Hall Road. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Myrna. Do we have any other speakers at all in terms of interests to declare by members? No? Okay, now move on to our minutes of our last virtual meeting as held on the 26th of May. You'll have seen that late yesterday I circulated the minutes in a supplementary agenda, and the minutes are actually set out on pages 94 to 108 of that supplement, and have also been published online. I've had feedback from Councillor Conception, thank you for that. So unless there's any other comments from members, are members happy to approve those as they stand? Could I just ask members collectively to unmute your microphones in terms of committee members and indicate your assent to the minutes, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, I have no urgent items of business to report as submitted to today. So with that in mind, I'm going to move us on to item number 4, our first application to consider today, which relates to land at the central reservation of Blackwood Avenue in Gateacre, Liverpool 25, which is in Woolton Ward. Chair, if I can bring you in now, please.
Speakers from the public and possibly 3 councillors to speak. So can I ask David and Avis Wilson to speak first, please?
David and Avis Wilson.
You can just unmute your microphone, both of you. They are on the call. If you could just unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Right. When do I start?
Start now, please.
If you can start now. Thank you.
There have been no notices on lampposts, no letters through doors, no notification from the council for this modified application. We believe that without official consultation, the planning application may be invalid. The 20-metre mast will be 18 metres from our boundary, overshadowing our garden and being hideously tall and prominent in the sky. 8 metres taller than the current mast, well above the tallest tree, wider and towering above the junction and surrounding area, dwarfing housing and dominating the skyline, an absolute monstrosity. It has an industrial look to it and in no way in keeping with the environment. It would, due to the design and scale, have a negative impact and be visually obtrusive at the junction with Woolton Road. This is contrary to paragraphs 110 and 113 of the National Planning Policy Framework. The cluster of ugly cabinets would dramatically change the nature and appearance of the grass verge and curbside, from green space to industrial storage area. The metal cabinets are ugly and would encourage litter and graffiti. The proposed location is on the tourist route to the famous Beatles landmarks, presenting a positive impression of Liverpool. My husband, a retired police officer, considers the position in close proximity to the traffic lights at this very busy junction will seriously impede the view to the right of oncoming traffic, particularly with the cabinets sited in such an elevated position. It will be a significant hazard to motorists approaching the junction who persistently try to beat the lights. School children walk down the central reservation daily, and if hidden by the cabinets when darting across the road for buses, as they always do, there could be a serious accident. Children should never be put at risk, and this is a high priority issue that should not be ignored. There is very significant noise pollution, particularly of an evening. This would increase and be uncomfortable for those of us living in such close proximity. UDP Policy HD 27 advises that masts will be considered provided that 1. There is no detrimental impact on the character of an area. 2. The proposal is designed to minimise the impact on the surrounding area. This proposed siting fails on both counts. In summary, we feel this is a totally unacceptable location for the proposed mast. There are too many negative impacts on the environment. It would be an absolute monstrosity. We hope you can be sympathetic to all our objections. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson. If you could just pause a moment and mute your microphone if you can. Can I ask members of the committee, does any member have a question for Mr. and Mrs. Wilson at all at this stage? If not, can I thank Mr. and Mrs. Wilson for addressing committee today. Can I ask you to mute your microphone and end your video feed, but you can stay on and continue to listen and watch proceedings. Thank you.
Can I invite now Mary Clark, please. Bernadette Clark, then Mary. Bernadette Clark next.
Thanks, Trish. I'm just going to bring Bernadette on screen, and can I ask Bernadette to unmute her microphone at this point?
Hello. Hello, Bernadette. Would you like to present your points to the committee?
Yes. Okay. Right. The current mast is 12 metres tall. The proposed mast is 20 metres tall and will protrude above the mature tree canopies with a bulky antenna will be seen against the skyline. As the mast is located at a high point on a hill, it will be visible from a range of directions across Woolton and Gateacre. The proposed mast is not designed to minimise the impact of the surrounding area and would appear as an incongruous feature in the street scene, contrary to Policy HD 27. The siting within this leafy green setting, where built development is subservient to the soft green character, would be visually detrimental and harmful to the adjacent trees as a result of the installation. It is claimed that going beyond 100 metres would leave a gap in the network, requiring an additional new mast to plug the gap. This suggests to me that there will be a requirement for 5G infrastructure to be installed every 100 metres, and that the installation of a 5G mast will invite additional masts, antennas and cabinet boxes in the future, further littering the street scene and having a detrimental impact to the character of the area. If alternative sites are being considered, then there are a number of other suitable locations, including an existing 4G mast outside the Aldi shopping centre on Gateacre Park Drive. Visually, this location would be more suitable as the retail development has a more urbanised appearance compared to the existing site location. Finally, paragraph 113 of the NPPF states that the number of radio and electronic communications masts should be kept to a minimum, consistent with the needs of consumers. This mast has received a total of 76 objections, 25 in 2019 and 51 this year. Previous proposals were refused by residents in the area on 2 separate occasions, which resulted in T-Mobile lodging an appeal against the mast, to install the mast. This gives a clear message that there is a lack of consumer demand for a 5G mast on Blackwood Avenue. Woolton has a reputation for being one of the most sought after areas in Liverpool, with its green spaces, tourist attractions and beautiful houses. Structures of this magnitude do not belong in this type of area. Please continue to protect the beauty of our Woolton. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. Do members of the committee have any questions for Bernadette at this stage? If not, can I ask Bernadette to mute her microphone at this stage, and I will ask you to also suspend your video feed if you have that enabled at all. We'll move on to our next speaker now, Chair, if we may.
Yeah, so I'd like to invite Mary Clark to address the committee now, please.
Just going to bring you up on screen, Mary.
Okay.
Yes, if you'd like to
Yes.
carry on, Mary.
All right. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay. The NPPF advises at paragraph 112 that reliable communications infrastructure is essential for economic growth and social well-being. This supposedly includes next generation mobile technology such as 5G. 5G is not wanted or needed by local residents. Both myself and neighbours have been working from home and have experienced no issues with internet connectivity or download speeds. You argue that the proposed new masts include additional antennae to accommodate 5G, which deals with HD video, home broadband and machine-to-machine communication. 4G is more than sufficient. We already have HD video, broadband and internet communication. Most homeowners, myself included, use Wi-Fi while working at home, which already provides advanced high-speed, quality and reliable communication. Can you explain why 5G is essential for our economic growth and social well-being when the benefits of 5G are marginal for the average homeowner? In 1969, Gateacre was declared a conservation area. The location of the mast on Blackwood Avenue will overshadow and be visible from Gateacre Park Drive, Cuckoo Lane and Rose Brow in Gateacre, which will have a material impact upon the character of the area. The current and proposed masts do not bear any resemblance to each other. The history of this particular location has attracted dozens of objections from residents in the area due to its location as a prominent junction with a long range of 2 refusals which were made in 2005 and 2007. While the current mast is hidden by trees, the proposed mast is over double the size of the tallest tree and is not in keeping with the area. The proximity of the mast and the cabinets to the light control junction may also constitute a danger to highway and pedestrian safety. 5G masts have recently been targets for arson attacks, and a new 5G mast in this busy area may put residents, drivers and pedestrians at high risk. If any road traffic incidents or related damage arise in this location after the installation of this mast, Liverpool City Council must be held liable.
Thank you, Mary. Is that the end of your comments?
Yes.
Thank you. Just before I ask you to mute, do members have any questions at all for Mary? In which case, thank you for your comments, Mary. If you could mute your microphone and end your video feed, but you can continue to watch us, and we'll bring on our next speaker now.
Okay.
Can I invite Jan Stroud to address the committee now, please?
I've just had a check through our list, Chair, and I can't seem to see Jan as present on our meeting today. So with that in mind, I suggest we move to our next speaker, which would be Mr. Ian Roche.
Yes, Roche. And Andy Dingmore is waiting to come in, our highways officer.
I'm going to ask Andy to come in after we've taken the members speaking as well as the other objectors, because there may well be other matters related to highways issues. So suggest Andy pick those up at that stage collectively.
So Ian Roche, please, if you'd like to address the committee.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, I live on Blackwood Avenue, and a bit of history regarding the site. In 2007 and 2005, the issues were refused, and EE and Orange, or whatever they called at the time, got it through because it resembled a pole, a telegraph pole that was disguised as a pole. 4 years later, EE got through a change to that, said they need to change it. Now it resembles a green bulb. But when I seen this latest new one, frankly, it's unbelievable the size of it. It's akin to a watchtower at that big. But I'll just read out what I put on the thing. The sighting of this mast is simply appalling. The sighting of the communications boxes on the grass reservation just in itself poses serious issues. The grassed area at present is raised and crowned and well above the road surface as it stands. To then allow 2 rows 2 metre high control boxes in a row, thus basically making a wall to completely block the view of the oncoming traffic down Blackwood, defies belief. The new proposal that they're putting in now is dramatically different to any other proposal that they put through. It will dramatically change forever the look of the local street scene, indeed the whole area. I firmly believe that local residents, it will change their lives to a huge degree, not only visually but mentally, but also in a massive diminished house price as well as real danger to children in the area. All I say to you is ask yourself or ask the CEO of EE would he like this outside his home, quite so dominant. Why they can't convert the existing installation without changing its size or visual impact is quite beyond me. Indeed, I've seen 5G master disguised as streetlights, and these do not dominate the area. They're simply not noticeable to the untrained eye. They're socially more acceptable and in keeping with what is a leafy street scene.
Thank you, Mr. Roche. Do you have any further comments, or does that conclude your speech, Mr. Roche? Or do you have any... Okay, thank you. Do members of the committee have any questions at all for Mr. Roche at this stage?
No, I haven't finished yet.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Just put off.
Okay. To clarify, the central grass reservation is used by a lot of school children every day. They cross over and walk down the central grassed area to get to the bus stop, which is on Blackwood Avenue. I know it will only be a matter of time before a child is seriously injured or worse. This is easily clarified by a site visit when the children exit from school. I'd like to know as well, has any of the councillors actually been to the site? I understand COVID-19's been here, but everyone's back at work as of last week. Most people are. I've also studied the planning drawings and find them to be very, very inaccurate. They do not relate to the actual street scene. The trees present are much bigger than the existing smaller mast, and no housing has been shown on the drawings. I can send images of the housing in the local area compared to what the mast will be. The mast is 3 times the height of the existing housing and massive. The new proposed design shows an astonishing monstrosity of a communications mast. This will dominate the landscape and street scene for literally miles around. It is literally twice the height of the existing trees and almost twice the height of the existing mast. It is 3 times the width of the existing mast. It is also bright white. To be frank and be perfectly honest, it resembles something out of a science fiction film akin to a police watchtower. Its size and dominance is unreal. It can be seen for a mile down Gateacre Park Drive. Such will be its massive proportions. This carbuncle will tower over the local street scene and give you an accurate indication of street size and prominence if you visit the site. It'll have a negative effect on the local street scene in what is essentially a conservation area. The whole area is renowned for its local attractions as well as being in the Doomsday Book. Local tour guides drive up Blackwood Avenue to visit local tourist attractions such as Strawberry Field and to the John Lennon House. This area is a beautiful representation of a pure area with its avenues and village life. With this proposal, the first thing anyone will see as they enter the area is an immense prison-style watchtower carbuncle that will be totally intrusive and not in keeping at all with anything in the area. EU have stated they cannot site the mast elsewhere, but as the previous speaker has said, there is a mast further down the hill which can be converted and is next to a shopping centre. This type of mast is more akin to being on a trading estate or on a motorway tower. It isn't akin to being in a leafy conservation area such as Woolton. I strongly object to this application and I would like it refused once and for all, because corporate companies seem to get a bit of planning 5 years ago and now they're going to put a mast which is immense size, and eventually they will add and add and add to it if the council passes it. It's not...
Excuse me, Mr. Roach, now will you draw your remarks to a conclusion? Go to your time.
Yeah, it's finished, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And are there any questions for Mr. Roach?
Chair, Councillor Juarez has indicated. I'm just going to bring you up on screen now.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to thank the local resident for coming in and speaking today. Can I ask how far does he live away from this mast that is going to be erected?
10 metres away.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? So can I pass on now to one of our councillors, Councillor Chris Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Mr. Rush to mute his volume and also to turn off his video feed if he could at this stage? Thank you. And thank you for addressing us today. I'm just going to bring on Councillor Brown now.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
We can do, thank you, Chris.
Okay, I can't see myself, but if you can hear me, then fantastic. Okay, so I'm probably going to say a few things I think that residents have already said. I think there's a few issues here. I think first we need to distinguish between the need of technology and, of course, the issue about connectivity goes wider than Woolton. But actually that doesn't seem to, that shouldn't detriment the wider environment of the immediate area that members of the public have already spoken about. I would worry with this application passing the precedent that it would set for the immediate area. I think with allowing such a application, it will be far easier for developers to pass further applications that will not be in keeping with the immediate area. And I think it's easy perhaps to kind of maybe think that this is just an issue for the leafy suburbs of Liverpool, that perhaps this is just a bit of an NIMBYism. But that is exactly the point. It's about keeping an ethos with the immediate area. People move to this area, people live in this area, and we have some of the highest council tax contributions because of its environment, because of its makeup. And of course, if something's affecting that, that's going to obviously affect people moving to the area, investing in the area. And we need to make sure that we keep this area as something special that people can visit as part of Liverpool. And we've already had contributions about the Magical Mystery Bus Tour and the Beeps Tour obviously coming past that, and that will detriment the immediate area of people seeing that as they head up Blackwood Avenue. The conservation area issue is interesting. The conservation area itself, as far as I'm aware, the 1969 guidance is, or the boundary, it isn't in that immediate area, but that doesn't mean that something just outside of that area won't affect the conservation area. And of course, it will be seen much further than the immediate area of Blackwood Avenue. And I suppose as a final point I would make is that the other day the Wirral had a similar mast rejected in part of its borough for these very points, the fact that it looks unsightly, the fact that it will detriment growth and investment in the area. And I think it's incumbent on developers, if you're trying to get something new through, and that you're sensitive of people's needs in an area. We've already heard suggestions that, things can be turned into lampposts. I've seen some examples where you can turn these things into trees. Now, they might not necessarily, look the best, but I'm sure you could be a bit more inventive in how they look. And there are areas nearby as well, and I'd ask perhaps that the developer or officer comes back and reports back where other sites were suggested as part of this. So all in all, I'm against this application and obviously stand with residents. I think that this will detriment the wider environment of the area, which I think is so important to people and to visitors and to the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Are there any questions?
Councillor Juarez, you have your hand still raised to indicate you want to speak on this one as well. Just unmute your mic, Myrna.
Yeah, sorry, no, I forgot to take my hand down. I have no questions for Councillor Brown. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Myrna. Chris, if you could just mute your mic and turn off your video feed, thank you.
Now, with Barbara Mace come online, does she want to speak?
I don't believe Barbara's been able to join us this morning, Chair, so I would suggest we move to our speaker, which would be Councillor Malcolm Kelly.
Yes, Mal. If you'd like to come in now, please.
Malcolm coming on screen now.
Yeah.
Malcolm Kelly, would you like to come in?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Obviously, the residents in the area have said everything that needs to be said, and I don't particularly want to repeat everything if I can. Just highlight here and a couple of issues taken from the planning report. What I would say is that just because there's a mast already existing on this site should not automatically cause the committee to consider this mast should go on site. I think this application needs to be considered in its own merits, under its own merits, without the need then that there is a mast on site, because only because this proposal, this application, the mast in effect is 26 feet taller than the existing mast, so it can't be considered as a like for like. This is going to have a far greater impact on the area than the existing mast does. In the report at paragraph 2.3, there's network, and I think in the same way that the committee can't and shouldn't consider this application on health grounds, and there's a lot of argument around for that, I don't it will have detrimental effect on the local area, very much so. And conservation area is more important in this particular case because you can literally see the boundary of the Woolton conservation area from this location, and I think a mast of this size and this scale will have a detrimental effect on the visual amenity of that whole area, and of course the conservation area, which picked up on the previous application going back a number of years, which was refused. And obviously it was I've been a councillor for Woolton for many years, and I recall that application happening at the time, and there was a big argument at the time about how that particular mast would look, how it would fit in that area. Designed or produced this mast, which by all accounts was similar to a telephone pole, and then I think they've more recently changed the design of that is in relation to the existing mast. This new proposal in no way is going to fit in to that area. It's going to stand out. It's not going to be able to be camouflaged amongst the trees in that area, and therefore I think that's another reason why this has to be considered on its own merits and not with the fact that there is an existing mast. They are two completely different designs. And then the last thing I would mention and highlight, which has already been mentioned, is the highway issues. Again, going back a number of years, there was a great concern about the location of the existing mast and cabinets so close to the junction of Woolton Road. And of course, this application, looking through the report, looks as though it is now going to be placed marginally closer to the junction of Woolton Road. And going back a number of years, the concern of local people, and I think the highways, if I remember rightly, was that because this equipment was so close to the junction, it was going to affect the visual sight lines for motorists or people crossing at that location, not being able to see each other because it'd be hidden by the equipment. And I think that's a very important thing to consider in this particular case, because again, the equipment is going to be that much bigger.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Can I ask, are there any questions for Councillor Kennedy?
In which case, thank you, Councillor Kelly. Just a quick comment, please. Just a quick question, please. Councillor Kelly, if you could please mute your microphone and turn off your video feed at this stage.
Right.
I'm going to ask at this junction for colleagues to bring on screen a presentation showing images of the application site and of the proposed mast to assist. And at this junction, I would ask the planning case officer and our colleague from Highways to unmute their microphones and to comment as necessary, if that's agreeable to the chair.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Yeah.
I can, yes.
Thank you. I'm Stuart Clark. I'm the team leader for the South team. This application was originally brought before Planning Committee in December of last year and was withdrawn from the agenda on the day, as there were revised, or there was concerns about highway safety issues from the location of the cabinets. Since then, the scheme's been amended to overcome those highways concerns, and a revised scheme was submitted, which was then subsequently re-advertised to the public to allow them to make further comments on. You've got a very detailed report which picked up on the vast majority of all the comments that you've heard today. What I'll do, I'll give a very brief précis of the report and then deal with some of the specifics that were brought up by residents and councillors. This, as you'll be aware, is an application for a 20-metre high telecommunication mast service 5G technology. This is driven by the need to roll out countrywide 5G technology, and the principle of providing that is strongly supported in the MPPF. This is, however, somewhat caveated by the need to weigh that benefit against the visual impacts that these masts will create in the location they're proposed. You've heard a lot of discussion about the height of the mast and why is it so high. I'd specifically direct members to paragraph 3.3 of the report, which explains quite clearly why the need for the 20-metre height is. And again, that's an operational requirement of the system. In terms of what members have to consider, as I've said before, it's very much a case of the benefits that the 5G technology will bring to residents, businesses and the wider economy against the visual impact of the mast in this particular location. And as Councillor Kelly did say, every application must be addressed on its own merits, regardless of what may exist or not in the area at that time. So just moving on quickly to some of the comments that were raised. In terms of the consultation process, we don't put site notices up. We go way beyond what the legal requirement is for advertising such applications. And in this particular case, 414 letters were sent out to residents on 2 separate occasions, and a significant number of objections were received in response to those letters, which does suggest that appropriate levels of communication were made to allow people to make due representation. Somebody queried about the need for 5G. Again, that's in your report, and specifically, and again, Councillor Kelly very kindly pointed out before at paragraph 2.4 in the report that we're not allowed to question the need for such technology as part of the planning process. In terms of, there was a couple of people who referenced why can't we use the masts down by Oldie and Gateacre Park. That's some 600 metres away from the application site and is outside of the area that they could potentially relocate the mast from this location without creating a gap, which in itself would create or necessitate the need for an additional mast. The wiggle room that we've got to play with on this would mean that if we moved it from here, it would have to go again outside residential properties on probably a more prominent site in the street scene, because it wouldn't be on a wide central reservation. So in that regard, your officers are happy that this is the most appropriate location in order to maintain the cell coverage network. There was a request for a site visit. That's a matter for members to decide as part of the assessment process. I'll clearly defer that to the chair. In terms of the assertion that the plans are incorrect, the plans that are submitted, they clearly scale at the correct height and show the mast at the correct height. Any trees that may appear in the background may well be indicative, and it's just to give a flavour of the actual impact. But the actual mast is drawn correctly to the correct height when scaled at the declared scale on the plans. Councillor Brown talked about setting a precedent. Again, each on its merits. The fact that if one was to be approved here, it wouldn't set a precedent for elsewhere. That application would need to be considered having regard to those particular circumstances. In terms of the last comment was really Councillor Kelly's, where he advised that he believed that he'd have a greater impact on Woolton conservation area. The nearest actual conservation area is Gateacre, which is some 400 plus metres away. And that's a considerable distance where your officers are happy that it's not going to affect the character of those conservation areas. So as I've said, Chair, there's a very detailed report in front of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Can I just ask, are we going to have comments from the highways officer on the highways safety? Can we take that now and then ask if there are any questions from members?
Thanks, Chair. Andy Dingwall, Highways Development Control Team Leader. We took a careful look at this application, given that the cabinets and the mast were in relatively close proximity to the traffic signal control junction. Initially, as the planning officer mentioned, the proposals were to site the mast and cabinets a lot closer to the edge of the carriageway as drivers would be proceeding down Blackwood Avenue towards the traffic signals. And we felt that the position of the mast and cabinets was such that it could potentially mask pedestrians who were waiting at the pedestrian crossing for the signal to be able to cross the road and may indeed choose to cross the road when there was a red man indicated. So on that basis, we went back to our colleagues in the planning office and asked for amended proposals to be requested from the applicant to take account of our concerns. The jury came back with amended proposals which showed the mast and cabinets located away from the edge of the carriageway, such that it didn't interfere with the intervisibility between pedestrians and drivers on that Blackwood Avenue approach. So, you know, once we've reassessed the application with the new details, we felt comfortable that the position of the mast and cabinets was such that it didn't present any highway safety concerns. So we didn't recommend. We recommended that no objections to the proposal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Have we got any questions? I think Councillor Cummings was indicating.
That's correct, Chair, but I've stayed from mute, Mike.
Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Chair. I am aware of that area. I was brought up in Chilwell Valley, so I do know that area. I have some questions about this initial proposal. If it was in these, as in the height, I wouldn't have an issue with that. I would be okay with that. But it's shown that it's going way beyond the trees. One of the residents and the local councillors have mentioned Gateacre Park Drive and the mast there. Now, in regard to size, I wouldn't have an issue with a taller mast in Gateacre Park Drive because there's already one there, and that is a small commercial area there as well. But coming back to Blackwood Drive, I don't see why the height issue I'm talking about with the planners, I cannot see the argument of a further higher mast, whereby where that situation is, that's a high peak area within the city anyway. So if you could come back to me on them, I'd like some answers.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, I'm not a technical expert when it comes to telecom signals, but as I said before, if you refer to paragraph 3.3 in your report, it explains why the need for the height is, and it's predominantly because this is going to be a mast that's going to be shared by two operators, which is advocated by the government in minimising the number of overall masts, and because of that, they have to have their own equipment in the mast. And this in itself drives the height because they need vertical separation. So regardless of whether it's on a hill or not, they've got to have the antennae vertically separated, which increases the height to the 20 metres. If you don't have a shared mast, you end up with potentially, there's four main operators, which is Vodafone, EE, 3 and O2. They all require, and they say the government advice is to minimise the number of masts, which is why the companies try where they can to mass share. The knock-on effect of that is potentially a higher mast, and that's what you as a committee are being asked to weigh the balance of, which is the visual impact from a single mast against the technology and the benefits that 5G brings, and potentially a number of smaller masts, but more of them. But we can only deal with what's before us today, which is this one mast, and it's the height it is because of the need for the vertical separation due to dual operators. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Stuart. Can I ask Nana Juarez to ask her question now?
Thank you, Chair. I have concerns with the resident that's come in this morning, and he answered that his property is 10 metres away. Now that to me is really not acceptable. I would imagine it wouldn't be acceptable to any of the officers if this mast was outside their house in that clock. Also, still, even with the changes, there's still 51 objections. That to me is still a lot. Also, it says on paragraph, 2.3, that raise that notwithstanding national advice to existing sites, insufficient consideration was given to other sites, and that sites such as Woolton Woods should be considered for completeness. Was Woolton Woods considered at all?
No, Chair, because to put these masts in, even in grass verges, there's the potential for significant impacts on trees if they're not protected and sited. So to put it in the middle of a wood, apart from the fact that you would have to have all of the antenna clear of the tree height, would probably drive the height up even more, because you can't have any tree interference with the signals of the actual antenna, which is about 8 metres, would have to be above the height of the tallest tree. And even to get the application in with all the ductwork and the stuff, you'd have to take out a number of trees from the wood. And this would be of a greater impact than the current proposal before you, Chair.
Well, there is
Do you
part.
want to follow up, Councillor Juarez?
Well, I can't agree with that, Chair, because it could have gone on on the perimeters, on the outside of the woods where there's no trees, and it wouldn't be in the way. It wouldn't be near to anybody's property, and it wouldn't be have a problem with the sighting if it was in a different location.
Chair, can I just clarify where the councillor means by Woolton Woods? Where exactly are we talking about? Which part?
Councillor Juarez, can you be more specific about where?
Can you give me the nearest road to where you're talking about?
Because there is the Blackwoods there, and I know because I do know the area very well. That goes right up to the perimeter, all the trees, right up to the railings.
You've got the Blackwood Woods, which is the ones I understand that are Woolton Road. But isn't Woolton Woods over by St Julie's?
It is, yes.
Yeah, again, for the same reason that we said we couldn't locate in Oldie Gateacre, the distance from the application site to Woolton Woods, you just bear with me, I'm just on Google Maps, over 1.5 kilometres almost. So that would be way outside of the coverage. You can imagine with telephone masts, if you imagine a honeycomb, and each honeycomb is a cell. If you pick the centre of that honeycomb and start moving it around, you create gaps. Now these honeycombs do overlap each other, but the movement that you've got is quite limited. And that's why that 100 metres is referred to about where we've got in terms of this particular cell. So it is quite limited about where you can locate them. That in itself, clearly, if members consider that the visual impact outweighs the benefit, they're fully entitled to run with that view. But that is the reason why this location has been selected.
Thank you, Stuart. Are there any other questions from members? Okay, so I'm going to move on to say, can I move that the recommendation as amended is approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask members to unmute your microphones, please, and ensure your video feed is live? And can I ask all members of the public who have registered to speak to please ensure your microphones and video feeds at this stage are turned off? Thank you. Myrna, before we move to the vote, you have your hands up still. Did you wish to say anything further?
Yeah, Michael, would I be able to move an amendment against this application today?
You can if you so wish. Please go ahead.
Okay, could I move an amendment that we do not approve this application today, as it will have an impact on residential amenity, and also because of the siting of where this will go, will also have a visual impact on the local area.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. Just to confirm the contents of your amendment, it's essentially that you propose that the application be refused on the basis that proposed developments would have a substantial negative impact on the residential amenity of adjacent occupiers, as well as on the visual setting and context of the surrounding area. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Does any member of the committee wish to second that amendment?
I will second that.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings, in which case we will vote firstly on Councillor Juarez's amendment, the effect of which will be to refuse the application. First of all, the Chair, I will ask for a vote, please. Against? Thank you. Councillor Conception?
Against?
Thank you. Councillor Marat?
Against.
Councillor Dunn.
For.
Councillor Hanson.
For.
Sorry, Councillor Hanson, could you confirm your vote again, please?
That's for, Michael.
For, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
For.
Councillor Juarez.
For.
Just to confirm the voting on an amendment, that is 4 members voting in favour, 5 members voting against. The amendment therefore falls. We now revert to the Chair's motion, and therefore the effect of that motion will be to approve the application as amended. So again, voting, we'll go over to the Chair first of all.
For.
Councillor Conception.
For.
Councillor Cummings.
Against.
Councillor Hanson.
For.
Councillor Kennedy.
For.
Councillor Juarez. Councillor Mallet.
For.
Councillor Dunn.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Cummings.
You've already asked me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Just
I'll
confirming,
vote again if you want me to.
your vote was so good, I wanted to hear it twice, Councillor Cummings. With that in mind, just to confirm the votes on this item, that is 6 members in favour of approving the application, 3 members voting against that resolution. The effect, therefore, is that the resolution is carried and the application is approved on that basis. Thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to our next item of business, which is agenda item 5 relating to Streetworks on Mather Avenue, Liverpool 19 in Allerton and Hunts Cross Ward. Now, at this stage, we have no speakers in turn.
I'm able to start to talk about this application now, Mike, is that correct?
You can.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I want to object this application today. It's in the ward that I represent, Allerton Hunts Cross. Is that there is other locations available within very close proximity to where this proposed mast is to be installed. At the moment, there is a mast quite close to a property, but that shouldn't, in my opinion, that mast shouldn't have been there so close to that property anyway. The new mast is going to be further away, but still, I believe that having masts too close to residential property is not right. It's not correct when there's other availability spots where it could go. Also, I believe that considering for future prospects or what it says in the national plan framework, that decisions need to take local circumstances and into account that reflect an opportunity area. So considering we think widening pavements and introducing cycle lanes, that particular big mass that's going to be moved meters away could have an impact on on the pavement and, you know, the opportunity in the future to have a cycle lane there. Whereas if the mast was put somewhere else, it could, I would ask you not to want to consider that it's way too
appropriate site would be that would still maintain the coverage and avoid a gap. Again, I'm just looking on Google Maps as we speak. The nearest available can see at least 350, 400 metres away, which is up at Allerton Priory by the golf course, and that's in the green wedge. So that's not really a location that we would advocate, even if it was in, if it maintained coverage. By the very nature, telecoms masts have to be where the demand is. And that tends to be, unfortunately, in residential areas and commercial areas where the usage is the most. So inevitably, they have to be, the surrounding area to this is completely residential, save for a local shopping parade. Therefore, if we tried to move it within what wiggle room we've got, you would just be relocating it again outside somebody's house. So given that there's an existing mast there, and we're actually moving it further away from the boundary of the property that's closest to it, we consider this is the optimum location to accommodate a shared mast. The existing mast will be removed, so we will only still have one mast there as opposed to two, albeit that it would be wider and taller. In terms of the highways impact, the scheme is actually amended to overcome some highways concerns and that by street scene to enable them to maintain the verge. In terms of would it affect a cycle lane, I probably have to defer to Andy Dingwall on this, but we're not aware of any cycle lanes that would require such a land take in this location, so therefore it's not been a material consideration. So in light of that, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions, but your office will recommend approval for the reasons stated in the report.
Are there any questions from members? Okay, so can I move that the recommendation as amended be approved? Is that agreed?
We will move to a vote in the same procedure as last time. So taking members in sequence, we'll start with yourself, Chair. Your vote, please.
4.
Thank you, Trish. Councillor Conception.
4.
Councillor Cummings.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Dunn.
4.
Councillor Hanson.
4.
Councillor Marrett.
4.
Councillor Juarez. Apologies. Councillor Juarez has indicated can't vote for this item. Councillor Kennedy.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
That concludes the vote on this item. And just for purposes of clarity, the voting is 8 in favour, none against, no abstentions, and Councillor Juarez obviously was not able to vote, having previously made representations on this matter before us today. On this basis, the application is therefore approved, and we now move on to our next item of business, agenda item 6, which is number 79 Sutton Street, Liverpool 13 in Chubelcon, Stonycroft Ward. Chair?
We have Mr. Rob Dodson who would like to address, and also a Claire Wilner. So can I invite Rob Dodson first?
Let's bring Mr. Georgeson on screen now, Chair.
Would you like to address the committee, please?
Mr. Georgeson, if you could unmute your microphone. Mr. Georgeson, if you could please unmute your microphone so we can hear you if you do want to address committee. At this point, I would suggest Mr. Georgeson's having technical difficulties, so I suggest we come back to Mr. Georgeson, and in this instance that we take the objector first. Chair.
So can we have Claire Wilner? I hope I've said that correctly.
Just going to try and bring the objector or former councillor on now. Claire, can you hear us? If you could unmute your microphone. Brilliant, we can see you now if you want to go ahead.
Go ahead, please, Claire.
Claire, could you unmute your microphone just so we can hear you? We can see you, but we can't hear you.
There,
That's better. Thank you.
I'm muted. Yeah, apologies
Well done,
for that. Thank you. Okay. Hoping that you have all, good afternoon, good morning. I'm hoping that you've all been able to read the 16 objections that were submitted on this proposal. When I looked at Planning Portal, I couldn't see them, and I would hope that you would at least have the opportunity to be able to do that before you make your decision today. There was another query in terms of the process. Has there been a site officer? What time, when? Presumably it was during lockdown. Parking, busy roads were quiet. And I would also, if you don't know the area, I would also suggest that there should be a site visit by the planning committee now that we're officially out of lockdown and back to work. This road is used as a rat run to cut the lights out at the corner of West Derby and Green Lane, and there are numerous near misses directly in front of this property. In the report, it also says that these properties are semi-detached. They are not. They are all terraced properties. The top floor bedroom, as in my house, is not full height of this property. A damp course has not been put into the property, and I understand that the damp is still evident despite lots of refurbishment work and dehumidifiers and the heating being on. According to another resident who has seen the current damp. Talking to planning officers, this is happening across the city. Cheap houses in Liverpool being refurbished and care companies being created overnight. These people have no track record of talking to neighbours. I have offered numerously times to get this property rented for him. Directors with no history of looking after vulnerable children with complex needs. These are the most difficult to place children and possibly may be housed here by cash-strapped local authorities elsewhere in the country. You are planning committee, but you are also corporate parents and have a legal and a moral duty to ensure that the 1,440 currently looked after children in the city are housed in the most appropriate properties. This house has a very local suspected drug dealer who threatened with threatening behaviour when you cross him, and I think that the applicant has actually personally encountered that. I'm not totally sure about that. There is no garden. The yard measures 4.6 metres by 1.6 metres with a tape measure from outside of the property. We all know what 2 metres looks like at the moment. This property, as I've said, is a damp terraced property. It's on a busy, often blind junction. And whilst I'm sure that the people who are going to be looking after these children on a day-to-day basis are professionals, well-meaning, hopefully well-trained, they are being not backed up by directors who have no interest currently, no professional qualifications, no knowledge of complex childcare needs. And I think that that is completely unacceptable in a city that is looking after so many children. I am in the unfortunate position of appearing like a NIMBY. I'm passionate about looked at, but I am not. I am passionate about looked after children. We have personally 2 adopted children aged 7 and 4 living directly next door to this terrace property, who every time that door shuts, of number 79, my whole house shakes. My husband is a property development and manager, so I'm not a NIMBY. If this application fails, which I hope it does, I say again to the applicant, I will do all I can personally to find you a decent tenant. This is a family home and it is not an institution. And I would urge each member of the committee to vote against this application today. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm also happy to read the complaint or objection by a Hayley Finnan, who suffered 4 years in another property in Old Swan, less than a couple of miles away from here, and has had to move as a result of living next door to that property, which operated in exactly the same way. So thank you very much for your time, committee.
Are there any questions for Claire? So do we have Rob Georgeson to come on to address the committee in support of this? I did see that he was in the lobby earlier, but I don't know if he's maybe left since.
Mr. Georgeson is still listed as present as an attendee. If you can hear us, to unmute his microphone on his device and ask him if he can hear us to confirm that, and I'll bring him on. Mr. Georgeson, can you hear us? Mr. Georgeson? I think we'll have to accept that as technical difficulties. What I would note that we have Councillor Conception had raised his hand to ask a question of Claire.
Yes, can you hear me, Claire?
I can,
you on
thanks.
now.
I was just going to ask, do you live next door to this property?
77 Sutton Street I live at. 79 is the next door terrace.
I see. Okay, that was all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. And thanks, Claire. If you could mute your microphone and turn off your video feed now as well, but continue to listen, please. We'll make one more attempt to...
Before I hand over to the planning officer.
Chair, we'll make one more attempt to bring in the applicant, Mr. Georgeson.
Okay, Mike.
I can't see any evidence that we'll be able to bring him in. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask colleagues. Mr. Georgeson, was that you there?
Yes. Hello.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you carry on and address the committee, please, Mr. Georgeson?
Yeah, sorry. My microphone, I've been trying to unmute it ever since you asked me to, but it was permanently showing muted.
Go ahead, Mr. Georgeson.
So go ahead.
Yes, okay, thank you. So appreciate some of Claire's comments there. However, I think, some of the points about Claire trying to address me to get tenants in is not relevant to this application. When I bought Sutton Street, I just started out as a property developer and obviously had plans to do that. I've known Michael, Michaela and Kevin, who are my business partners, for a number of years, and they recognised that obviously as I embarked on this journey, they wanted to approach me and bring to my attention Liverpool City Council's looked after children sufficient strategy. And to be honest with you, after several meetings and understanding the initiatives the council are trying to deliver, it's actually now changed my business model to obviously develop property to high standards and high specification. As Claire alluded to, there has been a lot of renovation work gone on there. In terms of the damp course, the damp's gone. When I bought the property prior to it being empty, it was vandalised and people had gotten into the basement and decided to flood it, which obviously subsequently, leaving the property empty for 2 years, caused more damage, which is now being rectified. We've set out to develop this company with the right accredited associates. So whilst I am personally an investor, there are 4 directors in this company that bring different skills and attributes. And it was evident from very early on that our objectives and morals are closely aligned. As you will know from a comprehensive management summary that we've submitted, we're not just opening these properties to put children in there just for the sake of it. We actually set up this business to build a brand which is recognised for quality and consistency, And we want to work closely with Liverpool City Council to aid them in delivering some of their initiatives for looked after children. One of them being keeping these children at home. Whilst I appreciate the comments there around the backyard not being very large, yes, it's not, but it will fit a table and a couple of chairs out there. And also, it's part of our plan to do a lot of outdoor activities, and there is a field close by. In terms of comments around drug dealers and things like that, I don't live on the road. Everybody I've come across who lives on the road is very pleasant, and again has had multiple opportunities to approach me should they want to. I think a lot of the objections that were raised initially was because my surveyor actually submitted the wrong property type, which obviously caused some confusion. I have been approached by a couple of neighbours whilst I've been there, ensuring that the quality and standards of the work that I've paid to have done is obviously of that standard. And when I've told them about our plans, obviously it's become apparent that this property will not be managed by me. There are three of the other directors who are on the call who are highly guarded with social care and those affiliations. We plan on delivering our properties in line with Ofsted regulations. So therefore, the type of people that we want to encourage to manage the houses will be the best. We're not looking to cut any corners. I've come from a background of you look after good people and good people will look after you. It's our aim here to not only house children safely and then introduce them to feeling safe, feeling comfortable, and help to change their mindsets. It's also we're also doing these things to protect our community. So whilst there is a perception there if somebody had to move out, if this home is managed the way it should be, so it's only the same as a family moving in. The neighbours can't stand outside the front door, and if they don't like the look of the family, they won't let me sell the house to them.
Thank you, Mr. Georgeson. Councillor Dunn, you've raised your hand indicating that you wish to speak. Is it a question for Mr. Georgeson?
Yeah. I think he makes a good point in the sense that obviously look after children in Liverpool, they need a family home. Obviously I'm a councillor for Streetworks. I can speak on behalf of two of my other colleagues, and we are welcoming look after children in Streetworks ward. It's the sense of where locations are that is the problem. Streetworks and Storycroft overall has a high crime rate. It's one of the highest crime rates in Liverpool. Also with antisocial behaviour. So the question really I would like to ask is, has he had any communication or any reports off Merseyside Police about the crime activity within that particular area? I think it's well documented. There was a report on Liverpool Echo just last week. There was actually a drug raid around the corner from where that house is. And if he can provide any kind of clarity on what he means by behavioural issues with the children, and also if there's any safety plans in with the application, will there be CCTV cameras?
Yeah.
How is he going to deal with that sense?
So again, it's part of our business plan, Joe. And thanks for those comments. As part of our business plan, you've seen there's obviously a major area risk assessment, which has already been completed and as part of our plan. In terms of drug trade and things like that, well, I live in Woolton, and not so long ago something happened there. So it's about how we make the home safe, how we get the people that we employ with the right accreditations, etc. As part of the regulatory reports that we're looking at, CCTV, fire alarms, theft alarms, etc., all have to be installed, and they will be. We we'll be working closely with the regulatory bodies to ensure the safe well-being of the house. I've also got, as I said, two of the social care people that have been working with obviously with me on the call, that if anybody wants to ask questions about the well-being of people that we're looking to put into the property, that's fine.
Any other questions? I only see Councillor Dunn's hand was up before. I can't see any others. So I'd like to hand over now to our planning officer.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, do. Who is that?
Joe.
Joe. Oh, yes. Okay.
Right.
Go on, Joe.
I think one of the other issues in regards to this, again, it's not about we want looked after children, we want the processes and we want the neighbours to be consulted fully, as it does affect them. I don't think, I can speak on behalf of myself, I have not had any communication prior about this children's home. I think if you had input off the local councillors of what area would have been suitable, this area is not suitable for the type of scheme you want to put in place. And I think the consultation could have went further, and I think one of the proposals what I'll be making in a minute is that we actually have an officer do a community consultation.
Well, in answer to, okay, also to point out to that, there is a problem. Liverpool City Council have. We've identified and started to put a plan in place to work with you to overcome that problem. Is somebody able to give me a list of postcodes that I should be invested in property in that we're not going to overcome this? I submitted the plan in January. We're now in June, and we're no further on. So we need to problem, and I'm coming with a solution. We need to work intrinsically together to ensure that the values are met, which I personally think they are. The right people are involved, and from our side they are. In terms of the area and things like that, again, if I thought that was going to be a risk from the off, I wouldn't have ever put Sutton Street forward as a property to do that. One of my colleagues wants to just come on and say something about some of the points you've raised. Could somebody unmute Michaela, please?
Sorry, we only take people registered for this committee, Mr. Georgeson. If you want to sum up what he would like to say, that is fine with me. But we will only accept people who've pre-registered to speak. I'm sorry about that, but they are the rules.
They have pre-registered to speak.
Michael, can I have a ruling on this, please, from you?
Thank you, Chair. I believe the individual concerned is Michaela Dwyer. Is that correct, Mr. Georgeson?
Michael Dwyer.
Michael Dwyer
can answer the questions that concerns.
As far as I understand, the emails were shared jointly with you, so I think on this occasion it's reasonable to allow your colleague, if they can shed further light and respond to the issues raised, to come on. So, yeah. Chair, I'd recommend we do let them on this occasion, just to ensure the committee has full information before it. And with that in mind, we're going to bring them on.
Yes.
And can I ask them to unmute their microphone, please, Mr. Dwyer?
Hi. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So Councillor and the committee, I just wanted to give some information basically about our background, because obviously the resident concerned is not aware of our professional backgrounds. Myself and Michaela are two of the directors of the company. Both of us are qualified social workers, have extensive experience in working within child protection, working with looked after children, and also approved mental health professionals. Now, I've Liverpool born and bred. I was brought up in Kensington. Kensington, has got its issues and challenges, and obviously the Tube Ward has its issues as well. And I appreciate, obviously, from the area risk assessment that, there is a degree and level of crime in Shoebrook that is problematic. However, when we're looking at where we deliver our service, whilst obviously we need to take into account those issues, and it's our responsibility as a provider to try and mitigate those. None of us are coming into this naively, especially the professionally qualified part of the directorship. We know that there are risk factors to mitigate in the communities, regardless of where the property may be. That there are different challenges across the city dependent on where we are. But I just wanted to reassure the panel and reassure the council and the members of the community that we are professionally qualified. We have got extensive experience of working with vulnerable children and looked after children. And we take that responsibility seriously. We're not naive to the issues that are in the area, or can assure the panel, the council and the community that we, as part of our our strategy, part of the model of practice that we're using, and the qualifications of the staff that will be in place, and also the matching process. We're very aware that obviously there are a proportion of looked after children who are involved in criminal exploitation, who was exploited, and in terms of looking at the criminal issues in the area, then we will factor that into our matching process, so that we have young people who come to the service who have less risk factors around criminal exploitation and more around welfare and backgrounds of trauma, and work from that, rather than this is not a floodgate open and we will accept people as an income, because that is not what the ethos of the organisation and our professional values are about. So considering the impact on the local community, the crime in the local community, and all of the risks that we need to mitigate as a part of that.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Chair, for your reference, we now have 3 indications to speak again. I believe Councillor Dunn has a follow-up question, after which we have Councillors Cummings and Marat, who've both indicated to speak as well, if you're agreeable to that.
Yeah, I want Councillor Dunn's follow-up first. We'll deal with that first, and then we'll have Councillor Cummings and then Councillor Marat.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dunn.
It's just a simple question. Have you had any communication with Merseyside Police or a report about the criminal activity around there?
We have done, as part of the Ofsted process. We have to submit an area risk assessment which takes into account all of the published data around criminal statistics for the area. That's factored in, and contact with the local community policing as well. I know that the area risk assessment has been completed, and we are aware of the crime, the crime statistics and the crime issues in the area.
So can I now have Councillor Cummings' questions?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to bring Councillor Cummings onto screen, then he can ask his question. Thank you. Councillor Cummings, you're on screen now.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very simple question. Joe, the local councillor, raised this with Rob before, and Rob responded, yes, it will be done. And it's around CCTV, fire alarm, all the safety mechanisms within this proposed house to support vulnerable young people. And all I'm asking is, if that is going to be done, I would expect that to be set up before the vulnerable young people move in. That is the question.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, the Ofsted requirements require that all of the safety equipment, fire regulatory stuff, that all of that is installed prior to approval. So right. At the point,
fine.
That's it. Yeah.
To ask his question now, please.
Thank you. I'll just bring Councillor Marat onto screen, if I may. Marat, if you don't mute your mic.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Billy. I can hear you now.
Yeah. Hi, Michael. Just one question. I haven't got my notes with me. So what age group are we talking about here?
So,
the young people.
Councillor, we're looking at young people between the ages of 11 and 17. So it's like your secondary school. It's your young people who are sort of approaching secondary school, or in further education.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hand over to our planning officer, John Hayes. John, can we bring you in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Good morning. Thank you for the presentation as well, and for the comments from the resident. Chair, before I get into the issues, can I just report two things in relation to this particular application? The first is a late representation which we received yesterday. I'll just read it out to you very briefly. Residents of 75 Sutton Street alarmed at the continued progress of the application process for 79 Sutton Street. Don't believe that the council would seriously consider the address for the proposed children's home, given it is a mainly residential location and very young children in the block. Can't understand why it's reached this level of consideration, given the local residents' opposition and concerns on the negative impact on young families and residents alike. We would like to view any environmental impact reports that have been done during this application period, and like some transparency and accountability in order that our rights and views are not overlooked in order to obtain cheap housing for youth with behavioural problems. So that's the first issue. The second issue, Chair, is if you were minded to grant planning permission this morning, there is a slight error in relation to condition 1. So the time limit is the wrong type there. So that would need to be corrected by the standard time limit condition for implementation. That's a 3-year time limit. So the type of condition you get on every other planning permission. Chair, obviously you've got a full report in front of you which goes through the issues, and you've had a full presentation from the applicants that has clarified a number of points that you as the committee have in relation to the matter. To make is clearly there is seems to be a concern around how this particular business might operate, and some of the concerns around safeguarding and things like security measures through CCTV and fire alarms and so on. As you've heard from the applicants, they are ultimately matters for Ofsted. So in addition to the planning process, there are obviously other regulatory requirements needed, in particular through Ofsted, to ensure that this is operated in a proper and safe manner. You as a planning committee are only able to consider the sort of broader planning issues in relation to this particular proposal. And by broad planning issues, what I mean is, would this particular operation have a detrimental effect in terms of amenity? Is it an appropriate use in the area, given the activity that you might expect with a children's home? And it is right and understandable that residents have concerns about the way that children are managed, and the particular operational requirements that go with that. However, there is a sort of limitation that there is through the planning process over what you as a planning committee can consider. The details are set out in the report. We were asked earlier by Councillor Marrett the age groups. That's set out as between 11 and 17. The numbers of residents, of children to be managed at any one time will be a maximum of 2. There would be a number of carers on site at any one time. They would operate in a shift pattern. They would be 12-hour shifts. So in terms of considering the wider sort of planning impacts, your officer's view set out in the report is that limited sort of movement of staff is not going to be significantly harmful to residential amenity. And again, I think I would make the point that a lot of these children's homes, the purpose behind having them within these smaller institutions is to give them a domestic setting. So the whole thrust of these types of operation are to provide some stability, to provide them within a safe environment, to replicate a family home as close as possible, to provide that environment for them. And it's against that context that your officers have considered the application and set out its recommendation to you in the report. The only other points I would add, Chair, are these issues are obviously picked up in terms of the conditions that we're recommending. So as part of the range of conditions, we've referenced the supporting documents that have been submitted with the application. in terms of the management of it. But more importantly, we've limited the number of children to be occupied. We've limited the number of staff to care at any one point in time. So you should only have a maximum of 5 people there at any one time. And again, we've controlled the overall shift pattern through individual conditions. So in planning terms, your officers are satisfied that this particular application proposal would not have a harmful or detrimental impact on the wider amenity of the area. Just picking up a couple of points that was made by the residents. In terms of the notifications that have been undertaken, again, that's set out in the agenda papers. We have had 16 objection letters received. Obviously you as a committee will be familiar, but they are not to be viewed if you want, but we provide a summary in all our reports. We don't obviously provide every individual letter, which I think was the question. Has a site visit been undertaken by the officers? Yes, it has. The application was submitted, I think, early in the year, I think around February time, so it was certainly before lockdown, and to the best of my knowledge, the officer dealing with the application has undertaken a site visit. And I think the other issues were around management, which I think I've addressed in my summary, Chair. So, amendment to Condition 1, Chair, we're recommending approval subject to the conditions set out. Happy to answer any further questions members may have.
We have a question from Councillor Dunn.
Hello, you're right, John. With respect, these children that will be moving into Sutton Street are not going to be living in a safe environment. They're going to be getting put in one of the most highest criminal activity locations within Liverpool. And, you know, the reason why I'm big on this Merseyside police report is, you know, there's not in this application that I'm looking at now any of a mention of Merseyside police. It hasn't got crime statistics in the area, and the children that will be moving in, you've just said 11 to 17. On the application, it says ages of 7 to 17. So can we have a bit more clarity on like the police reports and the actual age of the people that will be going in there?
So younger children as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think I did say 11, apologies. Make comments. They will make comments where they consider it appropriate for application. The details of which I don't think I want to go into with this committee, but suffice to say that they have made representations in the area. So it's open to the point is that it is open to the police to make it. They have that information open to them, and they've not chosen to make representations in respect of this particular application as they have with another one.
Thank you, John. That's very clear. And one of the other things is we do have a video of adults and children. Are there any other questions? So I would like to move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dunn, I believe you've indicated again. Do you wish to move an amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment that the application be deferred pending a Merseyside police report and a adequate consultation with neighbours.
Councillor Conception.
For.
Councillor Juarez.
For.
Councillor Thompson. That concludes our voting on this particular application, and for purposes of clarity, I confirm that the vote was 8 members in favour, 1 member voting against, and on that basis the application as amended is approved. With that in mind, we will therefore move on to our next item of business, which is agenda item 7, relating to the grass verge outside the Woolton Hall Soccer Centre on Woolton Hall Avenue in Liverpool for within County Ward. Chair, I'm going to ask my colleague to bring the presentation and images up on screen now, and I would advise at this stage that we have no speakers in terms of either applicants or agents or indeed any objectors. So with your agreement, I would suggest we bring in the planning case officer to comment on the presentation and the application details.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. John, if you want to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In terms of the particular application, again, the details are set out fully within the report. The issues are, again, similar to those that you've heard earlier this morning in relation to the visual impact in particular. In this particular application, you'll see from the report that it is to replace a similar mast, which is near the site, but not on exactly the same location. The existing mast is on the corner of Storrington Avenue and Parkstyle Lane. Your officer's view is that the particular proposal is considered against the backdrop of a slightly larger building. It will be taller than existing masts in the location, but your officers of the view that it is an appropriate size and setting for the mast and would cause limited harm to visual amenity. So for those reasons, Chair, we've recommended approval subject to the conditions state, which include obviously for the removal of the existing mast. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Thank you, John. Just a reminder to members in terms of purpose clarity, this is item 7, the grass verge outside the Woolton Hall Soccer Centre. Just I believe there was a slightly incorrect reference there, John.
Beg your pardon, Chair. I beg your pardon, Chair. That's entirely my fault. I do apologise. I did report in relation to item 8 there. So item 7, again, the issues are similar. You'll see from the site plan that this is actually located opposite the sports centre. It's in a wide part of the central reserve, and the position that it is, and it is again a fairly tall structure. We're happy that it would not cause adverse harm to visual amenity. I do apologise, Chair, for getting the order confused there, but again, happy to answer any questions.
Right, sure. So they were. Are there any questions, please? No? Well, in that case, I want to move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. So can you please advise?
4.
Thank you, Chair. Next in sequence based on what's on screen, Councillor Marat.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Just repeat that, Malcolm, please. Your feed's breaking up a bit. Thank you. Councillor Dunn.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings.
4.
Councillor Hanson.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Juarez. Councillor Juarez. Anna, can you hear us? If so, could you unmute your mic and cast your vote, please? Councillor Conception.
4.
Believe that will conclude our votes for this item of business, in which case, just to confirm the voting on this item, that will be 7 in favour, 1 member didn't indicate a vote on this occasion. On that basis, the application is approved. We will now move on fully to item 8, which is the site at Stonebridge and Parksdale Lane in Liverpool 11 in Croxteth Ward. Similar to business, we have no speakers in terms of applicants, agents or objectors, so I'm going to ask my colleague to place a presentation and some slides giving indications of the site and its context, and I would ask the case officer to comment as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to repeat what I said earlier, obviously in relation to the first item. That particular image that you've got there before you now, if you look at the top of that plan, where you've got the junction, the four-way junction, you'll see a little triangle of land on the sort of south side of that junction. That is where the existing 15-metre high mast is at the moment. And the red line on the plan is where the new mast would go. So there is a slightly different, there is a distance between the two, but the mast on that triangular corner would be removed if you are minded to grant the planning permission for the new siting. And obviously, again, as the report made clear, this is a slightly higher structure, but you'll see that it is located against the background of more institutional buildings. There's a small area of open space on the opposite side. You see it from that image as well. So your officers are satisfied that in this particular location, having a higher mast would not be detrimental to visual amenity. And for those reasons, Chair, have recommended approval. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Questions? I don't see any hands raised. So I'll move on to the vote. Can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Same procedures for previous items of business. I'll go through each of you in turn and ask you your vote. And I believe Councillor Juarez has been able to rejoin proceedings as well, so I'll come to her in turn. Starting with yourself, Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy? Councillor Marat?
4.
Councillor Dunn?
4.
Councillor Cummings?
4.
Councillor Hanson? Councillor Hanson? Councillor Thompson?
4.
Councillor Conception?
4.
Councillor Juarez?
4.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Hanson, if you can hear us. Would you like to cast your vote? In which case we are caught for the item and appropriate votes have been cast, and on that basis 8 in favour, none against, no abstentions, and the recommendation is approved on that basis. We'll therefore move on to agenda item number 9 now, which relates to the grass verge at the junction of Hillfoot Avenue and Speak Hall Road, Liverpool 25 in Allerton and Hunts Cross Road, Ward rather. In this instance, I'm going to ask colleagues to place on screen images and visuals of the application site, but as the Chair Juarez has already indicated that she wishes to speak objecting to this, it may well help to have the images on site by way of context as Councillor Juarez addresses us as well.
Juarez, to address the committee, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, committee, I would like to, well, I am objecting to this application today as I think that this junction where this mast is going to be placed is not the right siting for it. Hillfoot Avenue at that particular junction with Hall Road is extremely dangerous. Not a week goes past where there isn't an accident there where people get hurt, cars are turned over. Sometimes, you know, there could be 2 or 3 incidents a week. I believe that really the junction here needs to be looked at in terms of safety. For example, if do with one widened just a little bit, so a traffic going left could do so in a safer way. But as I say, this junction is very, very dangerous, and we have incidents there quite regularly. There's a further junction further down where a pedestrian was killed back, and the whole stretch actually, I would say, needs to be looked at by highways in a serious way as to what could be done to make it safer. I think by putting this mast there would have an impact on any future opportunities to improve this particular function. So I'm going to ask you to refuse the application. In the National Planning Framework, paragraph 9 states that decisions need to take in local circumstances into account so that they reflect the character, need and opportunity of each area. Now, by putting this mast there, I think what it would do is it would stop an opportunity to address the problems of this dangerous junction in the future, as you will not be able to move a mast of that size anywhere else. So this is a good opportunity to not have the mast there. You could have it further down by the Kentucky Fried Chicken outlet, where there's a grass verge there, and free up this site to make it safer for motorists, pedestrians and cyclists, because once it's there, you're not going to be able to move it. And also, you would be, the committee would be then contributing to the health and well-being of local residents. So I would ask you that, this is just not the right location for the siting of this mast on highway safety, with highway safety implications. So please don't move this item today. And that's the end of it from me, I'm afraid, on this item.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. Are there any questions from committee members for Councillor Juarez? Well, nobody seems to be indicating. I'm going to pass over to our case officer, but also request that we do have addressed the issue of highway safety, because Councillor Juarez has mostly flagged up that issue, but I think it needs to be demonstrated that the mast would actually affect visibility. So if I could hand over now, I think it's to Stuart Clark.
Thank you, Chair. As with the previous applications, this is very similar. The issues are very similar in terms of the design, etc. In terms of the siting side of things, on this particular one, we did ask them to look at the potential for roof locating it on some of the buildings in the Hunts Cross shopping centre. They went away, they looked at that, and they came back, and the buildings were too low to be able to get 20 metres above level and structurally for those buildings to take it. So this was considered to be the best or the optimum site in terms of cell coverage. In terms of the highway safety side of things, highways were consulted and raised no objections, but I think given the level of concern and query that Councillor Juarez has raised, it's probably more appropriate for Andy Dingwall to explain some of the issues that she referred to.
Would Andy come in, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to comment on those points that Councillor Juarez raised in relation to highway safety. As with all applications, we very carefully assessed the proposals for mast and cabinets at this location. We didn't consider in any way the siting of those masts and cabinet would interfere with visibility of drivers or pedestrians at that, accepted a busy junction, and didn't feel that the proposals would at all impact on the safety of the operation of that junction. So we raised no objections to that. I think the point that Councillor Juarez is making is that the siting of the cabinets and the masts potentially limits the space that is available in future should the council consider any improvements to that junction necessary, either in terms of improving safety or improving the capacity of that junction. Just in response to that, I would say that we've got no proposals at present, none that I'm aware of, to improve that junction in terms of capacity or highway safety. That doesn't mean to say that in the future we wouldn't have, but I'd be surprised if we would look to improve the capacity of that particular arm of the junction, because it's a left turn from Hillfoot Avenue into Speak Hall Road, which is already catered for with the lane that's there, and that's not really where the queuing tends to occur from at that particular junction. It tends to be on Speak Hall Road more so than any of the other approaches. So I think it's unlikely in the future that we come along with the capacity of that left turn from Hillfoot Avenue into Speak Hall Road, which would potentially be difficult to implement with the location of those cabinets. But we don't have any objections to the proposal as it is at the moment. Thanks, Chair.
We have a question from Councillor Thompson now.
Thank you, Chair. I see that we approved a mast here back in November 2019. It's not clear to this application from the mast that we already approved.
Yeah, Chair, there's very little difference, to be honest. It's just a different design, to the best of my knowledge. The other one was approved under what's called the prior approval system, which is slightly different to this one, but the issues are pretty much the same. That one, I don't, just bear with me, I don't, just checking the report, just bear with me 2 seconds. Yeah, that one was actually, it wasn't dealt with by the planning committee, it was dealt with under delegated powers because we only get a limited time to do those. But it was, the report was virtually identical to the one before you today. It's just a different, I think they had to move the site slightly.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. As I indicated previously, we have previously conducted audio and video tests, and I'm satisfied that the members indicated on screen are present and able to vote. Therefore, with that in mind, we'll start with Councillor O'Brien. Chair, if you could cast your vote.
4.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dunn.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Councillor Marat. Billy, if you could unmute your mic.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Conception.
4.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Cummings.
4.
Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. That concludes the vote on this item. The vote is 8 in favour, none against, no abstentions. Therefore, the application is agreed on that basis. And we'll now move on to our next item of business, which is number 10 on today's agenda. And that relates to number 20 Halsbury Road, Liverpool 6 in Kensington and Fairfield Ward. We have no speakers in terms of applicants, agents or objectors. So at this juncture, I'm going to ask my colleague to display some visuals of the application site and a location plan. And I would ask the case officer to comment as appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you have a full report in front of you. This is an application very similar to many that you've seen in the past for the conversion of the property to a 7-person HMO, and that is facilitated by a single-storey extension to the rear, a dormer extension and some roof lights. So again, it is utilising the roof space. Chair, all the dimensions of the rooms are set out in the report, and you'll see from that internally that it complies with the standards set out in your various policies. The principle of development is considered acceptable. Issues around residential amenity, again, your as a committee will be familiar with the issue raised, but again, we're satisfied that it would not cause significant harm to the wider area. Highways are satisfied with the proposal, given the nature of the accommodation, and taking all those things into account, Chair, we've recommended approval subject to the conditions set out in your papers. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions? Don't see anybody indicating. So I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. As indicated before, I'm satisfied that we have members present and they are the individuals concerned, so we will proceed with the vote. Again, firstly to you, Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
4.
Councillor Dunn?
4.
Councillor Conception?
4.
Councillor Hanson?
4.
Councillor Marat?
4.
Councillor Kennedy?
4.
Councillor Juarez?
Against?
Thank you. Councillor Cummings?
4.
Thank you. Just to confirm the outcome of the vote on that item, that is 8 in favour, 1 against, no abstentions. Therefore, on that basis, that application is approved. And we now will move on to our final item of business today, which is agenda item 11, the site of numbers 15 to 21B, Woodside Street, Liverpool 7 in Picton Ward. Again, for members' reference, we have no speakers in terms of agents, applicants or objectors. So I'm going to ask my colleague to display some visuals and a location plan on screen, and I would ask the case officer to comment on those once those appear. They're on screen now, thank you.
Chair, there might be a slight lag here in terms of the images that I can see, so I haven't got any images in front of me, but this is a very straightforward application, Chair, and would normally be dealt with by your officers under delegated authority. The reason that it's before you is because in this particular case, the physical extensions would impact on trees outside of the application site. And in order to mitigate against those loss of trees, your officers are suggesting that a Section 106 contribution is made to in lieu of the loss of those trees, so that money can then be utilised to spend for new trees in the immediate vicinity. Other than that, Chair, the issues are fairly straightforward and as set out in the report. As I say, it's otherwise non-contentious. There are no objections being made to it. Happy to answer any specific questions that you may have.
Well, I don't see anybody indicating to ask any questions on this. So there will be a 2-to-1 replacement for the trees, I believe. They will be of a scale that's suitable for the street there. And I'm hoping that they'll very much enhance the street scene. So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. As per previous, I'm satisfied that you're present in terms of the named members on screen. I'm happy to proceed with the vote. Therefore, Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Dunn?
4.
Councillor Thompson?
4.
Councillor Conception?
4.
Councillor Hanson?
4.
Councillor Marat?
4.
Councillor Juarez?
4.
Councillor Kennedy?
4.
Malcolm, just repeat that, sorry.
4.
Yeah, 4, thank you. And Councillor Cummings?
4.
Thank you. That concludes the vote on that item. The voting for that item is 9 in favour, no abstentions and none against, and the application is carried on that basis. That concludes today's items of business, and before we cease the live stream, I'll just ask the Chair to comment and close today's meeting off, but thank you everyone for your attendance.
Yes, thanks everybody for coming along. We're getting really good attendance with our video virtual planning meetings. And I'm quite pleased to see that we're actually managing to finish a planning committee before midday. But this is, of course, because we are having more frequent planning meetings, so we're not having as many items of business. So thanks everybody for today, and thank you in particular to our officers for all the hard work they've done in making these meetings so successful now. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you, Chair, and that concludes today's live stream feed. Thank you.